Hi, thank you for being with me today. You know, it's always an interesting thing to look for guests to be on my show, and today I've got a really interesting guest who's had a very interesting career path. Doug Box is with me today, and he comes from a somewhat legendary family here in Dallas, and has taken his life experiences into his career and is really doing great work to help families. And thank you for being here today, Doug.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here. It's good to see you again.
I know it. It's been a while. Now, tell our audience some of your history, because it is a colorful history.
Yeah, it is a colorful history. I was born and raised here. I grew up in Frisco, Texas, back when Frisco wasn't cool. Now Frisco is the fastest growing city in the United States. And I grew up in the house where the TV show Dallas first started, way back in 1978.
The opening scene where they race across the pasture up to the big house.
That's right. And I even wrote a book about it, Cutter Frisco, growing up on the original South Fork Ranch. That's been a lot of fun. And so I've worked in a family business after I graduated from the University of Texas. I'm wearing my special hat today in honor of the I'm wanting it to be fall, see, because of the heat. So I'm trying to think that we're in college football season.
Right. That's what you dressed for radio today.
I did.
You're not in your business attire.
Right.
You didn't realize that I was wild enough to have a TV show.
I didn't know you had a TV show.
Internet radio. So I've kind of roped Doug into it, and he came dressed for summer.
Exactly.
Thinking we were going to be on a radio show, and instead here we are on TV. But we're still going to have a great visit.
Yeah, we are. So anyway, I worked in the family business pretty much all my life. My dad was one of these titans of industry who could seemingly do no wrong. He was in oil, construction, cement, and we had quite an empire at one time going in our family.
Publicly traded.
Publicly traded oil and gas company. It was small cap, but it was on the NASDAQ, 200 million market cap, and then my dad passed away very suddenly at the age of 70. He went to sleep one night in a hotel room and didn't wake up. And we had done a lot of estate planning, but we hadn't done much succession planning. And so me and my three older brothers, we went through a real ordeal over the 4-year process. And it was kind of like a sweater that unravels after having a run in it. And this family enterprise kind of unraveled or came unglued after my dad passed away. And so
he was the glue that kind of held it together.
He was the glue that held it together. And so after this sort of trying experience, I decided what I wanted to be was to help families as an outside advisor to family-owned companies to help them navigate through some of these problems that families get into. And it's really just all about planning. You know, as I like to say, plan while you can, because there's a lot at stake anytime you mix family and money and resources together. That's a volatile mixture.
Well, it is, and people that don't have that good fortune think that rich people just have it made and it's all just keen and wonderful, whereas actually wealthy families have tremendous issues. I mean, there's a show on HBO now about succession, which is really tortured and dysfunctional. I don't know if you've seen any of the episodes.
I do know about that show. Yeah, it's a good show.
Yeah, it really brings home how just because you got the silver spoon in your mouth doesn't mean you're not throwing them at each other.
Yeah. And so my latest thing, I don't know if you're aware of this, David, but my latest initiative is we're trying to start a Center for Family Enterprise at the University of Texas at Dallas, which we are in talks with right now. We're in talks with the dean of the business school and the head of development. We're wanting to create an institute, I'll call it, for family enterprises to come together, and this is all going to be about education. It's all going to be about peer affinity. You put like-minded people in the room that have similar circumstance, similar challenge. Hey, we had this problem. How did you get help with that problem? You know, you had this issue. How did you tackle that issue? I think there's a lot of value that can be had by bringing people together and without trying to sell anything. These are people that
because you don't sell anything except advice.
Exactly.
And counseling to bring families together. So you
Right.
put families together in a group and counsel and let everybody kind of sound off with what
Right.
their goals and aspirations are.
Right. I'm just sort of the facilitator. I'm just setting the buffet, and I'm creating a format, a forum for families to come together and help each other. Not unlike a church, not unlike a sanctuary where people can share their woes and confidence and privacy. And family companies can be very isolating. Wealth can be very isolating. You know, the whole Howard Hughes thing, you know, how strange he got. And so families that are of like circumstance really need a safe, confidential, respectful forum where they can come and talk about their challenges.
So you talk with various stakeholders, we'll call them stakeholders because they all have an interest in an entity or a family. And you talk with them both as a group and individually, right?
Yes, yes. So I do take on clients as a private consultant. And then, as I said, this latest project that I'm working on is trying to create a family business center. By the way, there are these family business centers all over the country. They're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Richmond, Virginia, Fullerton, California, San Francisco, Wharton, New York, but we don't have one in Dallas.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, we've got a lot of family business in Dallas.
oh my gosh,
A lot of very successful. Dallas is an entrepreneurial city.
And now we have this big tax cut, right? So I've never seen an economy like what we have today. So I think if there's ever a good chance to do this, a good opportunity to raise money for this campaign, I think now's the time to do it. Have you ever seen an economy like what we have today?
You know, it's really unprecedented, and it's a little scary because when you're at a real peak, things are really great. That's kind of what happens right before a big reset.
Right.
So in good times and bad, it's important to live well in the good times, but always have an eye out that things may reverse and be sharply down. And certainly our corporate sector has gotten very leveraged, and many families have a tremendous net worth, but they also have a tremendous debt underlying their net worth. So that's, I know you see that some in family entities.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a little shaky what's going on right now. It's a little scary. I agree with you. Irrational exuberance was a term that they used in the '90s, and I think they may have brought back irrational exuberance.
Well, there's still a lot of people that are concerned, and not, you know, they say a bull market is over when the last bear buys in. And so the fact there's still a lot of people saying, woe is me, there's a lot of people sitting in a lot of cash,
Yeah.
is bodes well for things, that it's not all in and all on margin. And people aren't borrowing to buy stock, et cetera, much. But there is a lot of margin debt. So you get together with families and you travel and speak.
I do.
Pretty
I do.
widely.
I have. This year I've gone to Phoenix, Ithaca, New York twice, Waco, Texas, if you count that as travel, for Baylor's Family Business Center. And I'm going to Kansas, Wichita, Kansas soon, and I'll have clients in Chicago and Texarkana, Arkansas. So I'm kind of all over the map. Yeah.
Well, you know, you're providing a vital service for families to try to help keep them from going down the unraveling path that you suffered in your family, right?
Exactly. And sometimes it's easy to overthink what I do or think it's too complicated. Real simple way to think about what I do. I just help families communicate about their shared assets and their future vision for their wealth. What do they want to do with their wealth, or what is their wealth constitution all about? And sometimes the value that I bring to the table is that I get to ask questions that nobody else can ask. And sometimes they're kind of dumb questions, Whereas if you're in the family and you ask that question, you might be looked upon as like, well, that's a really dumb question. But an outsider who can pretend not to know anything can say, hey, I can ask this question.
Well, and the problem can be that the patriarch or the dynamic leader of the family is really an expert in his field and doesn't realize how little the siblings and the children and grandchildren may really know about how that business works. And if they share a very detailed technical report with people, they may not even be able to understand it. So that's, being in that position to ask simple questions and clarify things really is a big benefit to many of your clients and their children and grandchildren, right?
Absolutely. So it's a little bit, I liken it a lot to having a personal trainer.
Yeah.
About 80% of the value of a personal trainer is they make you show up and do it.
Yeah.
and they can count to 10. So it's like if we have an outside advisor, and just the idea that we are embracing and asking these questions and opening this thing up to sort of take our blinders off helps families. And it also alleviates their anxiety to know that, okay, this is being worked on, this is being handled, we're doing the right thing. I will say, no family that I've ever worked with has ever imploded, exploded, or gone out of business. And I don't think that has to do with me. I think it has to do with the families. If they're willing to reach out, and by reaching out, they're admitting they have needs. It's kind of like a marriage. Both partners agreeing that they need marriage counseling. If they can just go do that, if they can just set foot in the counselor's office, that's about 80% of the battle if they can just show up. In mediation, I'm a licensed mediator. I have a master's in dispute resolution from SMU and all that. One of the things that I learned is that 80% of all mediations are successful. 80% of the time, when you actually get parties in a room, real mediator, the mediator knows what they're doing, they're competent, there's an 80% success rate. But getting people to do that, the odds are way less than that, because most people won't do that.
Yeah, they want to fight it out.
They want to litigate, fight it out, or just stonewall. There's, emotional cutoff.
Well, it's many times there's denial about the need to bring in a team.
Right.
In terms of
right.
Families can be thinking, we've got it all covered, we've got all this estate planning, we've got everything nailed out, we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to bring the next generation or the generation down from that into the picture and get together and really hash things out.
Right. The hardest thing about all this stuff is that so many things in life are deadline driven. I like to use the analogy of the IRS. If every April 15th came around and the IRS said, oh, you know what? Sure would appreciate it if you get your taxes done, but if you don't get your taxes,
send it in when you want.
Just send it in whenever you want. When do you think most people would file their taxes?
2 or 3 years later.
Or maybe never.
Maybe never. Yeah. I could easily do never if I didn't have a deadline.
Never would probably work. In this whole, big picture looking down, the big problem with this is that so many things in life are deadline driven, but succession planning is not deadline driven.
Well, and you never know when the patriarch is going to die.
That's right. And then when that happens, when that unfortunate day comes, then all heck breaks loose.
Yeah, there's grief, there's angling,
become
there's
emotional, and grieving.
And greed comes in.
And greed, absolutely. So it's a tough sell to get families to do this, and that's why they really need an outside person, if not me, then someone, to help them say, doggone it, we're going to do this, and I'm going to impose an artificial deadline on you, because if I don't, so many things. So many things in life run on deadlines, including this show. I mean, everything is.
Yeah,
is
my show's got a deadline. We've got 30 minutes to talk, and then
Right.
we're off the air.
Right.
Well, you're pretty modest about your accomplishments and your efforts, but you are highly respected in your field.
Thank you.
My estate planning attorneys think a lot of you.
Oh, thank you.
And the fact that you've got clients across the country and are invited to speak at events across the country shouldn't let our viewers think that I just brought one of a multitude of family advisors in. Doug really is unique to some extent because he comes from the background of having the problems and has devoted his life to helping others avoid them, which not all wealthy kids growing up in a wealthy family would choose to be working out there as a consultant helping people. They would just kind of live a life of leisure. So it speaks a lot of your character that you've taken all this time to get trained and become an expert in the field to do it. So I'm proud of you.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've had some experience with this too. I mean, you have.
Yeah,
your
I
own
come
story.
from a background of long-term family legacy
Sure.
and legacy businesses, and I've seen things come and go. Andrew Carnegie, one of the wealthiest men in American history, made the statement that it was shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations.
Yeah.
Meaning the grandfather would make the money,
Yeah.
the son would kind of keep the business generally going, and it would blow up on the grandkids' watch.
Yeah. Yeah. The
And
cousins.
how many times that happens, I've seen it, I've known people
Sure, you have.
that comes about. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be in a fortunate situation, to be blessed to have kind of won the lottery of life.
Yeah.
And so I focus my energy on helping others and devoting energy to helping the disadvantaged. I'm treasurer of the Greater Dallas Coalition,
You do a lot of.
which is a wonderful
great-
charity
Yes.
that's really helping South Dallas. We had a fantastic monthly meeting on the Wednesday just before our taping, and so inspirational to see people really making a difference in people's lives. So if you are fortunate and have been blessed, which hopefully many of my viewers have been, please think about loving your neighbor, helping others, making that a focus in your life, because I'll tell you that will bring you real satisfaction. And Doug knows firsthand from working with families that hoarding money doesn't make you happy.
That's right.
You know, and you probably see in the families you work with that families that give are happier and more
Yes.
cohesive, that have a family foundation or have a family history of being philanthropic, come together better than families that are really all about grabbing all the money they can, right?
Sure. I like to say money itself is not enough to keep a family together. Because if our family wealth enterprise is just all about money, at some point someone, and you mentioned the word greed earlier, someone's going to get greedy and say, well, if this is just about money, I'm going to take my toys and go over here. I want to go over here and be independent, live in the mountains or live at the beach, and I don't want my assets, encumbered anymore. Philanthropy is a great way to keep a family together because there has to be a higher calling to keep these families together. It can be your faith, it can be God, it can be your church, but there has to be something bigger than you, because at some point money is not enough, because human desires are insatiable, and money equals power, and power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so we've seen it, you've seen it a lot, that you have to find something else, some other platform that keeps a family united. And giving back is a huge way to do that.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to hear you say that, and because we've, been friends and went to the same high school as in different years, so we didn't really sync up, but we've had some good visits over the years and
Yeah, we
dinners,
have.
but we hadn't really talked about the details of how a family stays together and stays happy when there's been great fortune, or when there's no fortune. when a family is just struggling to get by, the same skill set of believing in something bigger than yourself. And, you know, of course, my mantra that I repeat on the show repeatedly is the second commandment of Jesus is love your neighbor as yourself. And your neighbor includes your family. So
Right on.
if you put that as your mantra, you really can't have an argument because you really listen to the other person's point of view and have respect for them. And that's some of what you facilitate in these meetings and efforts, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't try to dictate to families what their family wealth constitution should be all about. I am a facilitator. I'm not a decision maker. And I just try to ask probing questions to surface what really makes this family system tick, and maybe give them some ideas about ways that they can, you know, do family retreats or do things that sort of thinking outside the box, no pun intended, but getting them off of the reservation, maybe, you know, in a place where they can think outside the norm of their business or their widget factory making money. What does our wealth really mean? We have to have basically a shared vision of the future of what does our family wealth really mean. Is it just all about us? If it's just all about us, that's great in the early going. That's usually the entrepreneurial model. But when you get into family business or family office, that's going to be insufficient to keep a family together, in my humble opinion.
Well, and you've seen a lot.
I have.
I mean, you've lived it, but you've been living it through other people's lives and helping them grow. And you work with a team in terms of people.
I do.
You work with the estate planners and the attorneys and the business advisors.
That's probably the most difficult, most challenging part of my field, is that it truly is a multidisciplinary, I know it sounds kind of like a cliche, but it's an interdisciplinary field. So this family business stuff, it touches on finance, legal, tax, accounting, behavioral science. It touches on education and philanthropy, just some of the things we're talking about. It hits everything. And I like to tell people, no one advisor has all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I know a lot of good questions to ask, but you really do, and this is a hard sermon to preach, but you really do need a team. It takes a team of advisors. And sometimes a slippery slope can be if you have one advisor trying to do everything, which you sometimes find.
Or one family member trying to do it.
Or one family member doing everything.
Having amateur effort.
Exactly. That they can sometimes, you know, they want to build a fence around their cash cow, and they put blinders on horses to make them run faster. But you don't want people putting blinders on you. And so one of the things I try to do is expand people's perspective about, you know, family wealth preservation. It's all about family wealth preservation and continuity. But the most important thing is happiness. But the most important thing, David, is family. There's nothing more important than family. So you can always make more money. I'm not saying it's easy to do that, but you can't get once you ruin a family, you can't go get a new family. Hard to do that, I think.
Well, you're so true, and it's so sad that sometimes a family that is blessed with so many financial assets ends up falling apart over those assets and not having that bigger common goal and not being able to work together. So.
Yeah. I think it's a shame when families allow their wealth, especially in the later generations, as my good friend Bill Brosaw says, there's nothing worse than watching people fight over money that they didn't make.
Yeah.
That's pretty, it's dishonoring.
Yeah.
To the founders, to the creators. That's the last thing they ever wanted to see happen, is their children or their grandchildren feuding over their money that they didn't make
or their parents didn't make.
Exactly. And I think that actually when families do that, I think it's almost like a curse. that
It
they
can
have.
be.
It's, yeah.
Well, without counseling, without bringing in a team to advise and counsel, or having that charismatic heart, and not all wealthy families are charismatic. Many of them are kind of independent. You know, part of being an entrepreneur is thinking outside the box and not being necessarily a group player, but having a vision to go where people say you shouldn't go.
Right on. Right on.
Kind of like Steve Jobs. I mean, he did things that people said shouldn't be done and built a huge empire, one of the most valuable companies in America.
Boy, it sure is.
You know,
Yeah.
with visionary doing what people thought was kind of foolish or not even thinking about.
Yeah.
So, well, it's an interesting world, and you're doing a great service to help these families. And, you know, I think your personality and your ability to just ask questions and encourage people to talk. I was just at the Greater Dallas Coalition's Dallas Champions Academy that met up in Gainesville at the prison for young boys. And these coaches kind of do what you're doing, but on a short-term basis of getting a group of people talking about their aspirations and goals. And it was amazing to hear these young criminals open up and start talking about what they wanted in their life when they started out being sullen and not talking. And so you probably see that with families when you talk, the kids and the younger generation are kind of quiet about saying anything at first. And
Oh yeah, they can be. Yeah, they can just be all over the map with that, because a lot of times if they've grown up with this family business or this family wealth enterprise, they take it for granted. And dad maybe has been a workaholic, you know, like my father was a workaholic, and didn't spend a lot of time coaching or teaching about the business. And so they grow up with an ill conception of what their, you know, how much money they have and what it all means and how it's going to affect their life. Yeah, for sure.
so you've seen that time and again.
I have seen a lot, my friend. I sure have.
Wow. Well, and it's too bad you have to abide with confidentiality and treat each client, because we could have had a great talk talking about some wild stories.
Oh yeah.
But that's part of your ethos, is that you are truly confidential and keep a family. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this show. A little different than my guests that I oftentimes have on, because Doug is making this a business as well as a passion. Hope you'll go to the Greater Dallas Coalition website, go to my website, and see the other episodes that we have. The Greater Dallas Coalition is doing fantastic work to help change South Dallas and rescue people from lives of despair. Much like what Doug is doing with the wealthy, the poor people are in the same boat of having dysfunctional families and on. Have a great day, and may the Lord bless you in all your enterprises.